Welcome to the Africa Speaking Podcast. The podcast discusses critical issues about the African continent. It is brought to you by Toyeza Communications in Nairobi. My name is Kimani Njogu. We continue with our second episode in our three-part series of this podcast on trade unions in Kenya with historian and writer Zarina Patel. So again, thank you very much for taking me through this amazing history of the trade union movement in Kenya. And I think that, we've come all the way to the 1940s, and the young men, the young soldiers, have come back to Kenya, and they have seen the challenge of, unfair treatment. The British soldiers have been rewarded for their service in the Second World War. The African soldiers have not been rewarded. They have come with some resources, and they have also seen in the Second World War that it is possible to take on the British. And they have also been learning from India and independence, and that actually you can go beyond reforms to real independence. And they're interacting very, very well with other workers in South Africa. And there's also the labor movement in the UK. And Shege Kibashia, at that time, has been arrested after organizing the strike in Mombasa and been taken to Kabarnet, where he's been detained. Right. So, very, very dynamic period in the 1940s.
And the establishment of the Chronicle newspaper.
And the establishment of the Chronicle newspaper, which is clearly leftist in its orientation. Makhan Singh, of course, doing amazing work with the workers and learning, and the Marxist ideology also, being imparted very systematically through the press and as well as through lessons and education at that moment. So
the connections with South Africa.
So the connections with South Africa. So these guys are flying to Moscow, passing through Nairobi, and going back to South Africa. Right. Very interesting. So what else is going on at that time? Very dynamic trade union context in Kenya in the 1940s.
Right. So there's generally, this awareness is not just restricted to a small group of people. There is a general agitation amongst the peasants and the agricultural workers.
Because there are plantations that have been established through the colonial experience, and workers who have to pay taxes are working on the plantations.
That and all the squatters who are, and the people who have been driven out of their so-called reserves.
Correct.
And everything. Correct. Okay. So, in May 1949, 1st May, Makhan Singh, together with Fred Kubai, they are in the Labour Trade Union of East Africa.
Fred Kubai has now moved into the scene.
He was head of another union.
Correct.
And he was actually the chair of the LTU. Makhan Singh is the general secretary.
LTU is the Labour Trade Union
of East Africa. LTUEA.
Yeah.
They now transform it into the EATUC, the East African Trade Union Congress, as an umbrella body for all the other unions.
So it becomes a congress.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's 1949, 1st May.
So they set up an umbrella body of all the various trade unions in East Africa.
Right.
1949.
Right. 30th of March next year, 1950. Nairobi is raised to city status.
Okay, Nairobi becomes a city. It's lots of dynamics.
Right. Now the EATUCC boycotts the celebration.
So the Congress now.
The Congress issues a boycott of the celebrations. Makhan Singh makes statements. There are two Nairobis, one for the rich and one for the poor. And the status of the poor, there is no change whatsoever. So we have nothing to celebrate.
Wow. So the workers are boycotting the celebrations of making Nairobi a city.
Right.
And of course, under the umbrella of the Congress.
Right.
And,
right. So you can imagine the consciousness,
Correct.
the class consciousness now,
Correct.
the rich and the poor.
Correct.
That was in March 30th. On 23rd April, that's the next month, a mass meeting is organized by CAU, the Kenyan African Union, and the East African Indian National Congress. They organize a mass meeting in which there is, of course, participation of the East African Trade Union Congress.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Correct.
And Makhan Singh, seconded by Kubai,
Fred Kubai.
Fred Kubai, then issues this demand for complete independence and sovereignty for the East African territories.
So they start now asking for independence
Right.
for East Africa. So again, very, very deliberate, not
Yes,
Kenya,
absolutely.
it's East Africa.
Yeah, but a public demand. Next month, 15th May, Makhan Singh and Kubai are arrested and the EATUC is banned.
This is 1950.
Yes, just the next month.
Yeah.
This is in April, they had made the demand. On 15th May.
So the first people to be arrested really are from the trade union,
Oh, yes.
from the trade union, from the Congress itself.
Right.
So it's not the politicians in quotes here, it's the leaders of the workers.
Yes. I mean, I don't think the politicians were not heard yet.
Yeah.
They were there.
But they were not heard yet.
They were not heard.
Yes.
You know,
yes,
right.
yes.
Of course, then there's the sham trial of Makhan Singh. They had to do it in Nairobi because they couldn't, in Nairobi it was too dangerous. And, when they were arrested, the following day, nationally, the workers declare a general strike.
So just to backtrack a little.
Yeah.
So they are arrested in Nairobi.
Yeah.
And taken to Nyeri.
Well, Fred Kubai is imprisoned here in Nairobi.
Yes.
And a few days later, Makhan Singh is moved to Nyeri.
He's moved to Nyeri.
Yeah.
And then there is a huge...
They realize that they can't have this trial here. It'll create too much, agitation amongst the workers. And the very next day of the arrest, the workers in Kenya, nationally, Mombasa, Nakuru, Kisumu, declare a general strike.
Within a day?
Yes, within
So
a
is that
day.
like
Within a day.
That means they had systems for rapid organizing.
Yes, but also how entrenched they were amongst the workers.
Correct.
And the level of consciousness amongst Kenyan workers.
Absolutely. This is 1950.
Yeah, I mean, today to organize a general strike, no one even tries.
Absolutely.
Kubai actually was then released on 27th May. Now, this was another way of the colonialists trying to divide,
So Kubai is
The way
released
they
first, while Makhan Singh...
Makhan Singh is detained for 11 and a half years in the North Frontier District.
So Makhan Singh is arrested in 1950 and he's not released until much later.
After Kenyatta is released, he was a much bigger threat to the British government than Kenyatta was.
So Makhan Singh is arrested before the declaration of the emergency in 1952.
Right.
And he stays in for 11 years.
11 and a half years.
11 and a half years in northern Kenya, as it were.
So now when the ATUC is banned, Kubai and Kagia is one of the ex-servicemen was returned from...
Bildad Kagia.
Yeah, Bildad Kagia.
Bildad Kagia had served in the Second World War. He is also back and he joins the trade union movement.
Right.
And he's working closely with Makhan Singh right from the 1940s.
No, well, he comes back in 1947 or something from the war.
Correct.
And then gets involved. So Kagia, together with Kubai, they become chair and secretary of CAU, Kenyan African Union.
Yes.
And quite unknown.
Because the Congress has been banned, so you need another platform, organizing platform.
Exactly. Okay. And quite unknown to the leaders of CAU, who are Kenyatta himself, Jomo Kenyatta, and the rest of the CAU committee. Okay. They were not aware. And these were the people who held reformist views.
Correct.
And also we're not interested in workers, frankly.
Yeah,
Okay.
the cow wing, that
Right.
is, yes.
Right.
More reformist than radical in terms of, the pursuit of independence and
But
workers'
within
rights.
them, Kawai and Kagia formed an inner militant core and began to support the beginnings of Mau Mau
Within cow.
within Kau, unknown to the rest of the committee,
Correct.
together with other trade union, workers, officials.
Correct.
Okay.
So they're organizing from within and now realizing that now the options are becoming less. I mean, the colonial government is becoming more vindictive and there must be a different way of dealing with it.
Well, they opt for armed struggle, right?
Yeah, they have to go to the armed struggle as the only alternative at that time.
And the armed struggle was, of course, waged in the forests, in the Aberdares and all that, okay, by the freedom fighters. But their supply base, information base and all was from Nairobi,
Correct.
And actually Kuwai was head of the taxi drivers union. So the taxi drivers played a very important role in ferrying arms, in ferrying information, bringing back freedom fighters for medical treatment, all that kind of thing.
The taxi drivers.
It was huge.
Yeah.
Yes, they connected the forest to Nairobi and other urban areas. Okay, and it is the workers' movement which really drove Mau Mau in a sense.
Correct. So in terms of the engine of Mau Mau and the intellectual input, I mean, so one could say that fundamentally the armed struggle was leftist in inclination. It was class conscious, and was it leftist on account of if the organizing was being done by Kagia and Kubai and others who had also interacted with the Chronicle and interacted with the South Africans, would one claim that in terms of its orientation, it was more left?
I think the group that was in Nairobi here was definitely left, ideologically.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
I don't think the forest fighters
Wow.
were at all ideologically educated,
Correct.
including, I don't think that Rankimati himself, I would not say was left.
Correct.
Progressive, yes.
Yeah.
Anti-colonials, yes.
Yes.
But I'm not sure about the left part.
Okay.
So in the group here, Kagia and Kuwai had the official positions.
Correct.
But they were working together with people like Minya, Franlal Seth was later deported, Pio Gama Pinto,
Pio Gama Pinto, yes.
J.D. Kali.
Yes.
There's a whole lot of
David
names.
Kali, yes.
So all these people were the think tank of the struggle. And Pinto himself, of course, was absolutely key to fundraising, which he did together with the government in India, Jawaharlal Nehru. Pinto had a personal relationship with Nehru
Okay.
and was able to get funds from India. I don't know whether he actually got the arms or he bought them somewhere else. I'm told it used to come to Dar es Salaam and then get ferried to Nairobi and then it would get ferried to the forest.
So technically, when Makhan Singh gets detained, Pio Gama Pinto and others step in to fill this gap and to continue the solidarities between Kenya and India.
Yeah.
I read Shiraz Durrani's book on Pio Gama Pinto, and he does talk about these connections between Gama Pinto, India, including actually Mozambique. He does talk about those connections with Mozambique, South Africa, the African American community, and so on. An amazing, completely amazing.
Pinto, just before he was assassinated, had been planning to go and join the Frelimo struggle in Mozambique.
Yes. It's interesting. It's very, very interesting because I read Shiraz's book and I was like, wow, I didn't know that Pinto was that connected
Yes.
with the Socialist International.
Right.
Because that's precisely what was going on at the time.
Right.
So the military struggle has started, the liberation struggle,
Right.
the armed struggle has started. The declaration of emergency in 1952.
So the emergency declared in
emergency
October
declared.
1952.
Yes.
Of course, the individual trade unions still existed.
Yes.
But now they didn't have the engine, the leadership, let's say, overall.
Correct.
So individually, they tried to continue to struggle on their own until in 1955, they come together again and they formed the KFL, the Kenya Federation of Labour.
The Kenya Federation of Labour, 1955.
1955. And the General Secretary then is Tom Mboya.
Very interesting. A young man.
Yeah.
A young Tom Mboya. TJ.
Right, TJ.
Yeah.
Brilliant, very well spoken, and almost militant,
Yes.
in his thinking. He's the Assistant General Secretary. Initially, the government tried, in fact, to deregister the KFL.
Yeah, the Kenya Federation of Labour. Yeah.
But then it changes ideologically because Tom Mboya begins to accept funds from the US and aligns the KFL with the AFL-CIO trade unions in the US.
Which is something that Makhan Singh had resisted. He wanted complete independence of American, British, and Russian influence.
Yeah.
Wanted something very, very independent. So Tom Mboya is now looking for affiliation with American trade unions. Yeah.
And that makes the British government quite happy.
Yes, of course. I mean, because now there is more liberal.
Because now they've got more control over the KFL.
Correct.
And so many others than the workers of Kenya, right?
Correct. So minimizing the radicalism.
And remember that this was, of course, the era of intense Cold War rivalry.
Absolutely.
So it was a big,
It's a very big win.
Yeah.
Very, very big win for the British.
Right. And then, of course, during the emergency and all that, nothing very great happened, dramatic happened.
At that time it's concentration camps, people are being arrested and so on. Fred Kubai is arrested.
But on the other hand, you got African leaders now coming into legislative council.
Correct.
And the political voice being now heard.
Yeah, the Legislative Council, 1954, Daniel Arap Moi goes the Legicor, there's Eliud Mathu, all these people getting into the Legicor Legislative Council to try and be co-opted, as it were, into the thinking of the British, and trying to do the reforms and so on, and kind of reduce the pressure from the liberation struggle.
Mboya in 1962. Just prior to independence. Mboya is appointed as the Minister for Labour.
Yes.
At that time, Dennis Akumu.
Yes.
A very militant trade unionist.
Yes.
Together with Ochola, Makinengo, Vicky, Macharia, those people, they object to his affiliation with the U.S. trade unions. And they formed what they called the Kenya African Workers' Congress, almost in opposition to the KFL.
Correct.
And they affiliated to where? To the All Africa Trade Union Federation of Ghana.
Absolutely. And of course, Ghana at that time has gotten independence. In 1957, Ghana is independent, and Nkrumah is
talking about imperialism.
He's talking about imperialism. He's pushing the Pan-African agenda rather strongly, and the liberation of the rest of the continent.
Yeah. There are a couple of other unions. There's Kubai's Kenya Trade Union Congress. He has his own. And then there is the Kenya Federation of Progressive Trade Unions, also alongside. But the main thing was the African Workers' Congress.
The Congress banned in 1950.
Yeah.
They bring in the concept of Congress again, just as we, in the early 1960s.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now there is these areas of conflict, and I would imagine to ameliorate conflicts between workers and unions and all that. In 1964, they established the Industrial Court.
To deal with workers,
yes.
workers matters.
Run by this famous Said Koka, which did some really, really great work with the workers,
Correct.
and workers' problems, okay? In 65, the tension got so much that the government dissolved both the KFL, the Kenya Federation of Labour, and the African Workers' Congress.
So, but at that point, of course, Kenya has gotten independence in 1963 and 1965. I think the agitation continues. Almost the Kenyatta government feeling a little insecure because of the ways in which the workers are organizing. Is that the case?
Yeah, and worried and concerned about the move to the left.
Correct.
Remember, Cold War rivalry going on.
Correct.
And so making a definite decision on which side of the divide they're going to be on, the government of Kenya. So the growing conflict with Jaramogi Odinga and his group.
So Jaramogi Odinga, who is left in terms of thinking, Bildad Kagia, who is left in terms of his thinking, Pio Gamapinto, who is left on his thinking. Then you have on their side, you have Thomas Mboya, you have Jomo Kenyatta himself, and of course Daniel Arap Moi and others.
The entire Kanu clique, right?
Absolutely, absolutely,
right.
Absolutely.
So it almost looks like the conflict between KFL and Africa Workers Congress became an excuse to dissolve them and then form what was called the umbrella body, COTU. The Central Organization of Trade Unions.
So everything has now dissolved, and you have the Central Organization of Trade Unions.
Right, and its General Secretary was Clement Lubembe.
Clement Lubembe, yes.
Right. Now, Makhan Singh has been sidelined completely.
So he's come from detention.
Yes.
But he's not
allowed to operate. He's thrown out of the Printers Union that he was a member of.
Correct.
And he's not given any position in government or in the trade unions. He becomes a nobody. And other people like Fitz D'Souza tells a story of how he tried to tell Makhan Singh that, look, I can talk to Jomo Kenyatta and get you a job, get you a post, And Makhan Singh totally refused.
This is Prince D'Souza's book on Forward to Independence, which I find to be a totally amazing book.
Yeah.
A very important publication about the history of Kenya. So Prince D'Souza, at that time, of course, he's an advocate. He's
the deputy speaker, right, of the LegCo.
Absolutely, he's the deputy speaker of the LegCo.
Yeah.
So he reaches out to Makhan Singh and says, look, we can talk with Jomo.
It's so pathetic, right? How can you, a leader like Makhan Singh, how can you sideline somebody like that, But Makhan Singh said, no, one, I will not beg for a job. I will not do that. And two, Kenyatta is very clever. He keeps informing Makhan Singh, just be patient. We'll do something. Don't do anything rash. Don't say anything.
Yeah. Be quiet.
Be quiet. And Makhan Singh follows his advice. So Makhan Singh is sidelined. EATUC, of course, was banned. And with the Asians, because now, after independence and the birth of Pakistan, the Indians now are more generally known as the Asians, okay? Their political voices also get dampened. Because the Kenya Indian Congress, which came after the East African Indian National Congress, is transformed into the Kenya Indian Congress. And the Kenya Freedom Party, in which Pinto and all these other more leftist Indians were at that time, are both disbanded. So, the whole left voice
is silenced.
Was muffled.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got what happens to Jaramogi, but I think we'll come to that later. So, the formation of COTU, the important thing is, it's formed by the government, not by the workers.
So they disband the Congress, they disband all this, And now you have the Central Organization of Trade Unions under Lubembe.
That's right.
Formed by the government.
Formed by the government. And therefore under the government's influence. The president, Jomo Kenyatta, had a direct role in approving the leading officials of Kotu.
In those earlier days?
In those days. No, well, that went on for a long time.
Yeah?
Yeah. And actually, I've written here that system continues to this day. Hidden or not, it's there.
It's control.
The trade unions in this country, even today, are not a worker organization.
They are too aligned to the political elite.
Yes, and they have a labor aristocracy in the leadership that is aligned to the ruling class.
So Kotu gets established, it's formed, it's under the ambit, as it were, of the state.
Right.
It's being controlled by the state.
Right. The workers are just cogs in a machine, right?
So that technically now weakens the workers' capacity to agitate for their rights, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
This concludes our second episode in our 3-part series of this podcast with historian and writer Zarina Patel. Thank you for listening to the Africa Speaking Podcast. Join us in our next episode, brought to you by Twaweza Communications. My name is Kimani Njogu. For any comments and views, you can reach us through our website, www.africaspeaking.org. You can also reach us on Facebook, Twaweza Communications, or on our Twitter handle at Twaweza Comms. You can also write to us on email info@africaspeaking.org.